Welcome to Swing Left, Nebraska. We are the regional chapter of Swing Left, 100% run by grassroots volunteers dedicated to fighting for a more equitable, inclusive, and prosperous Nebraska and motivating Democratic-leaning voters to vote. When we don't vote, when we don't get engaged, get involved, or stand up for what we believe in, we're effectively giving up our power. Action is the antidote. When we collaborate, work together, support each other, and our shared values, we can make our voices heard, make an impact, and inspire others to join the fight. Swing Left Nebraska offers you the information, actionable ideas, and tools you need to advocate for progressive legislation and to help elect Democratic candidates who will fight for the common good for all Nebraskans. Let's mobilize, let's take action, let's go. Greetings. My name is Leah. I'm a volunteer with Swing Left Nebraska and your host for the Swing Left Nebraska podcast, your weekly source for news and analysis on the latest developments in the Nebraska state legislature. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. Cindy Maxwell-Ostdiek joins us again this week to review important events, debates, and decisions that took place in the unicameral, giving you a comprehensive overview of what's happening in one of the most unique legislative bodies in the United States. This week, we chat about the endorsement of a new prison, the appointment of Carolyn Bosson to replace Senator Suzanne Geist of Legislative District 25, and the strategy of combining bills. We also provide you with an update on LB 626, the bill banning abortion after 6 weeks that is up for debate on Wednesday. And we discuss so much more. We have a lot to get into. So let's do a show. Cindy, we are back again. I appreciate your time. I know, as always, it's been a busy week. I know you've been down at the Capitol. Thank you for your time and going out of your way to go down there and pick up the information that we need so we can get this out to the people. Starting off, I know we wanted to touch on some really exciting news. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Yes. And I just want to say thanks again for everything you do to try to get this information out to everyday Nebraskans so that we can all be informed what's happening on our behalf at the unicameral. It was really neat at the beginning of the week to see Senators Kavanaugh, Hunt, and Frederickson come together to form a PAC. It's called Don't Legislate Hate. And they are going to focus on local elections across the country with trying to make sure that they're electing leaders who will make sure to represent everybody and make sure that they're not legislating hate. This whole wave of anti-trans legislation, LGBTQ types of legislation has really, I think, galvanized a lot of people here in Nebraska and across the country. And we want to make sure and try to support them. It's don'tlegislatehate.org. You can sign up, find them on social media, and also donate. I set up a small recurring donation, and it just really is a good feeling to know that they'll be helping candidates who will help to protect our young trans youth as well as our neighbors who are LGBTQ.
That's awesome. And I'll definitely put that link in the show notes so you can go right to that if you want to look it up and learn more information about the PAC or donate as well. Now, first on the agenda, things that were discussed last week in the legislation, tax approval moved forward and then TIOSA. I'm going to let you discuss that more because you have a good pulse on this.
I'm still learning, so I don't want to sound like I'm an expert on it, but I have talked with people who are working on this and following it very closely and kept talking about the package. If you watched it all this last week, there was actually a couple people online that, how sometimes you have those bingo cards or some people have like drinking games or whatever for something that comes up a lot when you're watching maybe a series together. People were following along and really commenting on how many times everyone kept saying respect the package because the governor and the Republican senators have all opted school funding and property tax relief. And these things are meant to work together. They should and can be separated as well, though. And things should be, I believe, basically legislated based on the merit for each individual program. I do understand, though, that you can't, in a vacuum, legislate some of these very large budget items. I have concern about the Property Tax Credit Act and, changing the minimum amount of the relief for that. Some of the things, though, that they talked about, I really did get a little bit more comfort. Now, overall, it is something that we need to keep an eye on because our long term prudent reserves, how we're going to be able to fund our schools when you get to the third year on some of these proposals, it really isn't attractive for all the districts, including rural districts. Senator Breezy's LB 243 and then Senator Sanders' LB 583 work together. And there were just a lot of discussions about how we can increase special education funding. It is so important that we do that in our state, and it has been woefully underfunded for quite some time. But they also need to make sure that they're not trying to work in one area and just supplant the revenue from another. And then what we're doing is not actually making an impact. So I want to keep my eye on these two bills. There's more actually, but these are the two that were up this week during the discussion on TIOSA. Senator Kavanaugh discussed the bill that she brought regarding universal breakfast and lunch for all students in Nebraska. And that bill last year had been forwarded out of committee unanimously. And then it just didn't make it with discussion on the floor, just they ran out of time. And then this year, this is actually stuck in committee. Senator Kavanaugh's proposal has not been brought forward for the committee to do exec session on it. So she brought it as an amendment. It is true that so many students in all districts struggle with hunger. And it's something that is really difficult for people to not just focus on school when you're learning, but just to thrive in general if you're struggling and hungry during the day. So this support would actually help these families to free up those dollars. Maybe some people aren't familiar that school lunch and breakfast was actually taken care of at a federal level during COVID due to the COVID emergency. There were dollars that came in from the federal level to help with all schools being able to provide that. And then this last year, starting in August, many parents were surprised to find out that wasn't the case anymore. And it sounds like it's not that bad when you take like $3 or something for lunch for your child. But when you add it up 5 days a week, if they have breakfast at school as well, if you have several children in school, like me, I have three. They're in 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. And so they're teenagers and they sometimes go back for seconds. It adds up. And this was something that I really wish the senators would have worked harder to find the dollars. I think that in all of the budget proposals, especially regarding some of the tax credit, there's income tax cuts that are proposed for the corporate and individual top brackets. That's in another package by Senator Linehan. I think that we could have found the money to make sure that our school children are all able to focus on their learning and not be hungry. I was disappointed that didn't move forward. I can't help but wonder that if all the senators are going to be talking about how we have this surplus, and keep in mind, a lot of it has to do with COVID emergency dollars that were influx to our state. But right now, at this minute, is we're working on trying to make sure and get some of this money returned to, I hear some of the senators saying, return the money, so to speak. I think we should focus on working families and making sure that we're supporting our working and struggling families.
Absolutely. If this bill doesn't advance this year, there's no potential for it to come back next year. Is that correct?
What could be worked on next year. They're calling it a package, the Property Tax Credit Act, the TIOSA funding, the income tax cuts, those types of things. I think they're all going to work together as moving parts. The budget's coming through as well. We have to also keep in mind that appropriations and the budget proposals are starting to come in next week. The one thing that the legislature does have to do is balance our state's priorities. And I hope that senators are taking into account that we want to help our taxpayers with relief. And it is very important. And I have even talked to people in my district here in District 4, which is West Omaha, and some people say they think it's maybe their neighborhoods that are well to do. But there are also people on fixed income in all districts that struggle with these property taxes. And we certainly don't want people to be priced out of their home based on property taxes and things like that. So it is very important to work on. I think we need to balance it though and make sure that when we do this relief, we're focusing it on the people who can also not only, have need that could be struggling or with working families, but also put it to work immediately right back into our economy. I hope that the senators will work on these income tax cuts and some of these other tax packages and be a little bit more big picture and keeping everybody in mind as far as across the state and not just people at a certain income level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking of
Mhm.
senators and getting things done, they are combining some bills as a new strategy in order to really get these bills across the finish line before the end of the session. A couple I wanted to drill on that have been combined is the dyslexia bill from Linehan and then Senator Terrell McKinney's bill 63 regarding the dress code and freedom to wear your hair the way you want that would impact the Black and brown communities of Omaha. Can you discuss that?
Yes, we're seeing a large number of bills that are being incorporated. This session has to do with the filibuster, and we're trying to get some legislation passed. It's leverage too, right? Not only are some of these bills just important and valuable to Nebraskans, but some of them are also maybe leverage for some senators to ultimately support the underlying bill. I know there's a lot of strategy that goes into that. Senator Linehan's bill, I know there was a lot of question about the dyslexia collection and reporting of the information. That is something that I think it should already be happening. That's it's the part that had come up during this whole discussion about this bill is why hasn't that already been happening? And what might be necessary for us to go to the extra step to have another layer of accountability regarding this type of reporting. But it did open up the opportunity for other bills to be attached. And one of them that we're very glad to see move forward is LB 630, which is Senator McKinney's bill. It's just so important. It has the dress codes have racial and religious implications, and it has disproportionately impacted students of color. It would make all school districts adopt a written dress code, basically to have a consistent policy in place, because sometimes what's happening is that there are students that may, for religious reasons, might wear scarves, or certain students, like when we talk about indigenous students who unfortunately there were some that had their hair cut
Mm.
in the last year or two. And that is something that is very deeply upsetting for people with their religion. And so this uniform code and policy will help to protect students from these religious discrimination types of impact. This was very important to move forward, and I was glad to see that was included in her bill. It is really important to try to follow along with the news and keeping yourself up to date with which bills are being included and making sure that you're letting your senators know what your priorities are, that they're really focusing on the things that you are looking for your family, for your business, for your community.
Pivoting over to Tuesday of this week, we had a lot of things going on, but one of
Mhm.
those was the primary mayor election. And Mayor Larion of Lincoln knocked it out of the park. She won against two Republican candidates, and one of them was Senator Geist. And after that election on Wednesday, Senator Geist announced that she would be resigning from her District 25. Within 24 hours, Carolyn Bosson was appointed by Pillen. And I apologize if I pronounced her name incorrectly. So, what can you tell me about that?
It was fast. I was really interested on Tuesday to hear more discussion on LB 753. That was on the agenda, which Senator Linehan's bill regarding Opportunity Scholarships Act. Basically, it's the tax credits program. And that was skipped over because maybe one of the reasons because Senator Geist wasn't in, I think, the chamber quite a bit of the day because of the primary. It was interesting the very next day on Wednesday, Senator Geist had made the announcement that she would be resigning effective the next day. And within an hour or two, Governor Pillen had a press release that he would be making an announcement for an appointment on Thursday, the next day. So this all moved very quickly. And I know that it's really frustrating for everyday Nebraskans who are concerned about transparency and good government. This process, there was no application, there was no formal interview process. I don't know. It sounds like the governor may have been talking with people over time, anticipating possibly if Senator Geist would win and then be vacating the position in LB 25. I don't know much about the new senator. That person was just appointed on Thursday. Senate-elect Mazen is a previous prosecutor and someone who it sounds like she will be supporting Senator Geist's positions. She said in the Nebraska Examiner article that said she echoes Geist's support for LB 626. And just to remind everyone, Senator Geist actually co-sponsored 626, which is the abortion ban. And the senator-elect said she also, like Senator Geist, supports LB 574 and LB 575, which are the anti-trans bills brought by Senator Cal. I think we can see that Senator Geist both will be continued with this new appointment. I just don't think that we're going to see anything with someone who would be taking a different approach.
Yeah, she echoes a lot of the same viewpoints. And like you said, on the record, said that she's going to support the anti trans bill and the anti abortion bill as well.
Was frustrating too because I know you and I had visited just a little bit about how appropriations bills, including regarding the prison proposal, and how Senator Geist was really instrumental last year in torpedoing the reforms that Senator Lathrop and the other senators on the Judiciary Committee and within the whole body had been working on through the whole session. And it just really at the very end of the session fell apart last year. And it was so discouraging for all of us watching because in addition to the prison overcrowding, which in and of itself is shameful, there are so many reforms that have been recommended we take serious consideration to implement here in Nebraska. None of those implemented last year. And Senator Geist had a big part in that. And it was very disappointing. I would wish that this year it would have come forward and been something that they worked on again, but I'm just really not seeing a lot of movement on those.
That brings up a good point that the Appropriations Committee endorsed the new prison 9-0. That's a big deal. Can you discuss that?
I'm just very personally discouraged because I had wanted to see some of the reforms that have been discussed last year. We have so many neighbors overrepresented when we talk about Black, Indigenous, and people of color in our state. And it is something that I think the rest of good conscience are very worried about. And when we talk about this prison, I remember Senator Stinner last year, was the appropriations chair at the time. He said it may be that we need to replace our prison. It's very possible that with all the work and the maintenance and it's crumbling, and they just have all these issues. And maybe the location isn't appropriate either. It's very difficult staffing wise. I'm not going to sit here and say that I think that it's totally wrong that they might want to reconceive our prison and where it's built or how it's put together, but it doesn't solve the problem. This is the thing. There's too many of the senators that think we're just going to build a prison and then we don't have to work on other reforms. And Senator Lathrop really tried to bring attention to this last year. And it was so disappointing to watch it fall apart. It really was. I just feel like so many of the senators aren't ready to just roll up their sleeves and get to work on this. And they're going to kick it down the road and we'll be dealing with this for the foreseeable future. And so many experts have said that if we don't change anything with our policies, with our laws in our state, we will fill this prison and need to build more capacity. It's very discouraging.
I want to read a quote by Senator McKinney, and I'll post the link for the articles from Nebraska Public Media. He said, by day one of that new prison being open, it will be overcrowded, and we will still have an issue with overcrowding. We can't even staff Tecumseh State Correctional Institution. Still, And individuals that are incarcerated there can't even see their families on weekends because of a staffing shortage. So I got on the mic to say, if you oppose the prison, please call your senator and let them know you oppose it, especially without criminal justice reform, McKinney said. That's another call to action that you can take to reach out to your senator about prison reform instead of building more prisons to overcrowd, basically.
Basically, yeah. And there have been times where the water hasn't been working at the prison. And if you can imagine having those types of difficulties on top of all the overcrowding, it is not how we want to treat any of our Nebraska neighbors. It just really isn't right. And I think that one of the things so many people don't understand is if there isn't enough staff, first off, it's not safe for people who are incarcerated or the employees and the staff. But it also means that people can't see their family. They can't take part in some of the programs that actually position them to be ready for parole. And it kicks their date down the line because they can't take advantage of programming. It's also even sometimes even restricted some people the ability to read. One of the things that's difficult is if you don't have the staffing and the hours available, then we can't even get books to all the people incarcerated in our Nebraska prisons. And I can't imagine that we were withholding things like that from people because we can't figure out how to make this work. It's just really disgraceful.
It is really disgraceful. Pivoting to common sense gun control, you attended a rally called Enough is Enough. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, it was put on by Students Demand Action and also supported by Moms Demand Action and Nebraskans Against Gun Violence. And I'm just so proud of one of the people involved in our legislative study group. One of our organizers is a high school senior. His name is Jaden Speed, and he's been involved with Students Demand Action for years. He put this together, one of the main people organizing this. And Senator Rabel got up talked about how important it is that we make sure that we're holding our elected officials accountable. One of the things that so many people are talking about when we say gun violence and what happened in Tennessee is that some of the senators are saying that we want more guns. We want more guns in schools, even like to arm teachers or have more resource officers and things like that. More guns will not solve our problem. And we really need to make sure that we're helping our senators understand that, yes, we need to respect and honor and protect the Second Amendment, but common sense gun reforms are necessary. The people that got up and talked, I was really proud. One of the young people from District 4, Maddie, a seventh grader from Legislative District 4, she came all the way from Omaha to speak as well. And I actually really admire her. I met her last year regarding Mom's Demand and some of the actions taking place for common sense gun reform. And she is an artist. She has actually played her art for many different organizations. And she spoke up on behalf of her classmates and wanted to make sure that the adults and the legislators understand that these children are scared. They're frightened to go to school. This weighs on them. And it's something that we should be taking care of. We really just need to get this solved.
And we need to be paying attention, especially with what happened in Tennessee, where two Black senators were expelled because they used their voice with their constituents to push for common sense gun control after the mass shooting that took place in a Tennessee school.
I just want to say first how sad it is with all of the mass shootings that have been happening across the country. We have more than one a day, and they don't all make the news. I have been really hurt after the tragedy in Tennessee to see so many young people raising their voices and coming physically even to be heard at their capital to say, do something, fix this. There have been young people coming out in force to tell the legislature there that they want action, and they have been peacefully protesting for a week now. And it is with large numbers, and it's just amazing to see. And I know that there are adults there supporting them as well. Now, all this discussion about what's happening in Tennessee with the rules and decorum and having them being expelled, very unfortunate. And I think that really as a parent that it should have been handled differently. But one of the things that I take home from that is that it's important that we be watchful citizens. So here in Nebraska, it's our responsibility, it's our privilege, but it's also our responsibility as a second house to be careful and watching. And we have oversight with our legislators that the laws that they're creating on our behalf. We should be working with our legislators and they should be working with us and listening to us as well. So I'm hoping that anyone who's listening will be talking with any young people in their lives, whether that's we have people currently getting ready to graduate in a month or so. We have people maybe coming home from college over the summer, or you talk with your nieces or your nephews or your neighbors. Make sure they're registered to vote. Make sure they know what their responsibility is, and then also to support them if they have questions or if they're looking for information and how to get in touch with their senator. Because I think sometimes the senators in Nebraska have been dismissive of young voices. And it's unfortunate because I get frustrated. We're not focusing on environmental issues in our state. We're not focusing on any number of really important, critical types of issues. And I think if more young people came out to vote and were really in touch with their senators, they would have to listen because otherwise they would not be able to continue with being reelected. We're really able to see here in Nebraska that our population is aging. And as young people are becoming more involved in our elections and things like that, I think that it would do the senators well to be listening and to be proactive about that. And really, don't we all want to take care for our daughters, for our sons, for our grandkids? I just think that it's really heartening to see everyone that's really paying attention. And I hope that will translate here in Nebraska too.
You mentioned paying attention, and LB 254 is coming up for debate at the Nebraska legislature. This bill would develop and maintain publicly accessible digital internet archive of closed caption video of the proceedings at the state house. This was introduced by Senator Tom Brewer, would give Nebraskans the ability to watch legislative proceedings at their convenience. And I know this has been a bill that's near and dear to your heart as the Nebraska Legislative Study Group. You guys do an incredible job of uploading video of the sessions on Facebook Live and on YouTube when you can. So talk about that. That's exciting that that's moved forward.
I was thrilled when I saw that on the agenda for Thursday. Now they didn't get to it. So it looks like it's on the agenda late after other bills for next Tuesday. So I hope that they're able to get to that. Really important that everyone understands that this is a way for all of us to have access to how the legislature is making these laws on our behalf. Not only on the floor, when you look at the debate that's happening at the unicameral, but also in the committee hearings where everyday Nebraskans are sharing how these laws would impact their lives, their livelihoods, and their loved ones. These types of things are accessible to us now through the transcript, but it's not user friendly. It's not the same as being able to watch the interaction that you would see on a video screen. I'm really hoping that we can get this passed. And it sounds like it would be something that would be implemented and go into effect. It would take over a year to get it going. So I really want them to get started now. It's just time. It really is.
It's way overdue, way overdue. Now, looking forward to this week, I know we say this every week, it's going to be a heavy week, but it's going to be a heavy week. Wednesday, 626 is up for debate. That is the anti abortion bill, banning abortion at 6 weeks. And you're planning to be there Wednesday, correct?
Yes. I'm really hoping that people will come out, if possible, on Wednesday to talk with your senator, to be in the balcony observing how the floor debate is happening, to just be there to support everyone trying to encourage these senators to not restrict our reproductive freedom any further. We talk with the medical experts in Nebraska and the OBGYNs. They tell us that our current restrictions enough and that we should not be infringing on their ability to provide standard of care to their patients. And it is really scary when we talk about this bill and how it could impact these doctors. And we'll be really sad in the future if a bill like this is implemented and we lose this talent from our state. We all just really want the best healthcare for our families and loved ones. And I just think that we need to be listening to doctors and we need to make sure and listen to women. I trust Nebraska families and women to make their own healthcare decisions. And it's just so important that you come out on Wednesday if possible. If not, please make sure that you call your senator or email your senator and let them know how important this is to you.
Absolutely. And this is a bill that majority of Nebraskans oppose. This isn't just progressive Nebraska or the Democrats. This is majority, both the Republicans and Democrats and independents and everyone in between opposes these egregious restrictions. If you've already contacted your senator, contact them again. Reach out to senators that may not support the bill that you're aware of. Contact them, leave a voicemail on a Sunday night if you'd like, if you feel more comfortable doing that. The more voices that can come together and push back, the better.
Especially when we see what happened Friday with the ruling from that judge in Texas about medication abortion and the pills that would be restricted, not just in Texas, basically nationwide. I know that there was a stay on that ruling for a week and there was another ruling. I don't know what's going to happen with that. But here in Nebraska right now, abortion is still legal. Abortion is safe and it is something that we want to keep as available for anyone who needs it. The difference between this bill and the one last year, some of the senators are saying because it's a 6-week ban, that this would be a compromise. Last year, there was a trigger ban that almost passed, and it would have completely banned all abortion. And 6 weeks is not a compromise. It is something that is not reasonable. Most people don't even know they're pregnant at that point. And if you were unfortunately in a situation where you were assaulted, like if you had been raped or if there was a case of incest, there are requirements built into it that are just not workable so that you could access this care. I am very concerned that there are Nebraskans that might think, okay, we can compromise. And what we need to understand is that we already have restrictions in Nebraska on abortion. And the experts are telling us that we should not restrict it any further. And we just really need to listen to them and trust women to make their own healthcare decisions.
Absolutely. So Wednesday is going to be a big day down at the unicameral. The agenda is up for next week as well. What else are you paying attention to?
On Tuesday, they start right out with appropriations. And Senator Arch, at the request of the governor, appropriate funds for salaries and members of the legislature and then constitutional officers. And then they'll move on from there. There's speaker major proposals that are budget related. And then there's a bill. I'm not sure how much time it will take to get to some of these bills, but Senator McKinney's 531, which is about the Economic Recovery Act. That one is very important.
And
And at the very bottom is LB 254.
and what's the 531, the Economic Recovery Act? What can you tell the audience about that?
I know the senator's been working very hard to make sure that our focus regarding economic recovery is for all Nebraskans. And especially when we talk about areas that here in Nebraska have traditionally been underserved and underrepresented regarding economic incentives. And we need to make sure and correct that.
Yes, I agree. He's been working really hard on that bill. And so I'm really hoping that this will move forward as well next week.
Yes, and really on a daily basis, there's always information that you can find on Nebraska legislature website. And that is also a really good resource that you've shared about Nebraska Public Media.
Yes, Nebraska Public Media is a really wonderful source. They do 3 to 5 minute nuggets of what is happening in the unicameral on a podcast throughout the week. And you can find that wherever you find your podcasts. It's called the Nebraska Public Media. And then their website as well, nebraskapublicmedia.org. They write some wonderful articles that give a good overview of things that are happening in the unicameral. And then you can also listen and watch the hearings as well on that site. Is there anything else that you want to leave the audience with?
No, I just really am optimistic when I think about how people are getting involved with their senators, especially young people. And all of us that are of a certain age, we should be making sure that we're involving young people in these decisions because they really have so much at stake. And we need to make sure that we're trying to keep excellent, talented young people here in our state so that we can grow.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. Cindy, thank you again so much for all of your time being the voice, being the messenger, going down there to the Capitol and standing up for Nebraskans and fighting for the common good for everyone in the state. We'll catch you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Swing Left Nebraska pod. We hope you enjoy today's episode and learn something new. Remember, change happens when we all work together. So, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends and families. It really is the best way to stay up to date on the latest news and events related to progressive politics in Nebraska. And if you're interested in getting involved in helping to elect Democrats down the ballot for the Lincoln general race on May 2nd, head to nebraskademocrats.org to sign up to volunteer or to donate. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Let's mobilize, let's take action, let's go.
Ready, set, go. Get ready to go.